Zombie runner, Bobby Shands, Bobby Shands, Bobby Shands, effectively wild.
Joey Meneses,
No.
walk-off three-run digger,
Stop it.
walk-off three-run shot.
Oh my God.
Meg, he's the best player in baseball.
Effectively wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2359 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, joined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
It pains me deeply to say this, but I must admit that Mike Trout has become boring. I think he's just kind of a boring baseball player these days. It hurts me to say that, given the history of my fandom for Mike Trout and his significance to this podcast.
Sure.
And all of the wild hypotheticals that we have entertained over the years.
Yes.
But really, we haven't talked about him since he returned from injury.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm happy that he was able to return and that he's been playing regularly, and he's already up to the most plate appearances he's had in a season since 2022, I believe. But there just hasn't been that much to say about how he has played. He's played okay.
Yeah.
He's still a perfectly fine player. He's an above average baseball player, but that's about all right now. And when he was perpetually hurt, which was quite recently, and I'm not taking for granted that that's not going to be the case again, but that wasn't boring, at least. It was noteworthy. It was sad. It was tragic in a sports sense.
Yeah.
It was extremely lamentable. And I guess it became kind of a constant refrain, and it was sort of a broken record. So there wasn't much new to say about it, but it was at least something notable. Whereas now that he's playing regularly, you can't lament that he's not in there. And yet he's just sort of there, chugging along, doing okay. He just turned 34 this week. Happy birthday to Mike Trout. And that
Happy birthday, Mike.
That rocked me a bit because I think 34, I don't know how you feel, but I think 34 is the first baseball age that feels old to me. Is that how you would, where would you put that when you see age X season and you think, oh, he's really getting up there?
I think maybe I agree that it's 34. Now, having said that, I don't think that that necessarily makes you actually old, even in baseball terms, right? Because we always have to make this distinction between the normal 34-year-olds walking around in the world and then those who happen to play professional sports. But I think that 34 is where you have background anxiety about small injuries or dips in performance being harbingers of a broader decline. Obviously, with Trout, we have some circumstances particular to him that brought that concern about earlier. We've been worried for a minute, but I think that when they hit 34, you know, if they have a couple week stretch where they're playing poorly, you start to go, what does that mean? You know, does that mean anything? Is this indicative? Is this a harbinger? You're not really looking for harbingers when a guy's 30, you know? You're just like, he's having a bad 2 weeks. But I think 34 is when you start to feel nervous on behalf of strangers, you know?
And it depends on the player, obviously, and maybe it depends on the era. This has probably changed as the aging curve has kind of moved up a bit. Yeah. When we were young and it was the steroid era and you had these sort of anomalous aging curves, and of course you had guys who were really great and deep into their 40s, then I don't know that I would have attributed anything to 34, but now 34, I don't know. It feels like you've kind of crossed a chasm there. It's you know, it's not enormous difference between 33 and 34, but 33 just, it feels like it's the other side of that divide for me for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that to commingle it with life stuff, you know, when you hear about like a 34-year-old who's a homeowner, you're like, yeah, that's the thing that people do at 34. I mean, not me, but like that people do. And you maybe are reacting to it differently if the person is like 24. You're like, whoa, how did that work? Which grandparent wrote that kid a check, So just to like be specific. So there's that piece of it where you're into a different era of life, both as a player and as a person, which, has an era component to it also, right?
And it's in the grand scheme of things, still a young man. So we're talking about sports old, and it feels fraught to talk about this now that we are older than this, but still, it's especially striking, I guess, just because I met Mike Trout in a sports sense from afar when he was a teenager. He came up when he was 19 years old. And so that was a full 15 years ago now. Yeah. That's a long time. Yeah. And because he played such an outsized role in this podcast's past, and because his rise and establishment as the best player in baseball coincided with the beginning of this podcast. It was, I think, an early topic in our rookie year of Effectively Wild. Like, is Mike Trout already the best player in baseball? And in retrospect, yeah, probably he was. But he has fallen far from that now. It's just he's not that entertaining a player now. He is actually the league leader among all qualified hitters. He has the highest 3 true outcomes percentage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's at 51.1% of his plate appearances have ended in a walk, strikeout, or home run. And I don't know if that's inherently less interesting. I mean, Aaron Judge is second. He's quite interesting, Right. So I'm not saying that necessarily means that you're a boring batter if you're just the 3 true outcomes guy, but he does strike out in 30% of his plate appearances these days. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And even though he walks at about half that rate, which is still considerable, he doesn't do that much when he's on the bases anymore.
Right.
He's stolen 2 this year, and he probably shouldn't. He probably shouldn't strain himself in that way. But of course, he was such an exciting runner and base stealer when he was younger that the fall from that is also stark.
Yeah.
And this is really, I guess, the first year where you could say, just looking at his sprint speeds, that he has lost a step at least. He's still an above average runner, but he's 67th percentile sprint speed this year. And basically every year of his career, he's been 90 or above. Even as recently as last year, he was 90th percentile. And then the year before that, he was 96th percentile. Like, he was still not necessarily stealing as much, but when he wanted to, he had that gear. Yeah. And I guess it's possible that he still does, and he's just not shifting into it as much because he's trying to preserve his body, which is probably a smart calculus. But the fact remains that we just don't really see him getting up to his old top speeds anymore. He's no longer a center fielder, which, again, is also probably for the best.
Right.
He is probably a below average right fielder even now. So it's just like a guy who could do absolutely everything when he came up and was known for that, other than, I guess, throw really well, although even that weakness he kind of corrected over time. And now he doesn't really do anything especially well, except he hits still fairly well. He's in the 130-ish WRC plus range, a little bit below that. And I've been hoping that there was more there, because he has had a bit of a expected weighted on base, actual weighted on base disparity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not that huge a gap. And this is the 3rd season now that he has had some significant gap between those metrics. So maybe this is just who he is
now.
Yeah. And, in this era of baseball, there aren't many 34-year-old hitters who are like even this good anymore. So, but man, it's kind of deflating that, he's gone from either great or unavailable to now, even when he's available, he's just kind of good, I guess.
It's tricky. I wonder if we shouldn't have been, I don't know that you would describe yourself as blindsided, so maybe I'm fighting with a guy I made up, but I wonder if we shouldn't have been quite so surprised because, part of the chore of sort of persuading people who looked at Trout and saw, even at a time when he was the best player in baseball, sort of a boring guy, part of getting people to appreciate just how good he was helping them to understand like the completeness of the game, the way that he was able to do everything well, even if he wasn't, a standout in a way that was obvious compared to someone like Judge, where it's like you have this guy who has one of his tools that is truly several standard deviations above and beyond everyone else, right? Like you don't need to persuade people that like Aaron Judge can hit the baseball far and with force. No, Mike Trout's a good home run hitter too, right? But it was a more muted, every tool was a little bit more muted than the guys who were like 7s or 8s, but he was able to do all of them very well, right? And he had this profound capacity to improve in areas of the game of his game where he perceived or others perceived that there was weakness. And so I wonder if with a guy like that, you're just going to end up having sort of a boring middle or decline phase because it's like, now you're taking all of these tools that were previously like quite good, but not loud necessarily all at once, right? Like the cacophony came from them in concert. Can I strain this musical analogy any further? And now you've sort of turned down the volume on all of that.
Yeah, and he's been a 3 true outcomes guy for a long time, really, other than his rookie season. He was in the 36 or 37% of plate appearances range. And after that, he's pretty consistently been in the 40s, mid 40s. I think there was even one year, maybe 2021, when it was even higher than this year. And the league-wide rate has increased since his rookie season, at least, though it's actually been down a bit lately. It appears to have peaked at, 2020, I guess, if you count 2020. But if you don't count 2020, then 2019, 2021 were around 35% of all plate appearances league-wide. And now it's down to 33.4%. So MLB's kind of gotten that under control, or it's self-corrected in some way. But it's just like old player skills and old player profile at this point. And there are only a handful of guys older than he is or as old as he is who are hitting better than he is. That's just a reflection of this era of baseball. Even though he turned 34, this is his age 33 season. And the only qualified hitters age 33 season and above who have a higher WRC plus than Mike Trout are Aaron Judge, George Springer, who's had a fun bounce back season.
Yeah, sure has.
Max Muncy, who has returned to the Dodgers now, Freddie Freeman, fellow Dodger, and Eugenio Suarez. So that's it. It's not a long list of guys at that age who are better than he is or have been better than he is. But I just wanted him to defy that, of course. Sure. And I guess if he has a Pujols-ian compiler phase now, then that wouldn't be the worst thing. Like, he's at 398 home runs, so in short order, he's probably going to get to 400, and that'll be a nice little milestone for him.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if he could just stick around and manage to stay in the lineup and hit 25, 30 homers a year the way that Pujols was. And if he could get to 500 at some point, that would be nice. Obviously, like the more optimistic outcomes for him war-wise and being a inner circle great by that metric and being one of the best of all time as he was through age 27, then that's been off the board for a while now. But it'd be nice if he could at least get the career numbers up a little higher so that, there'd just be a little less of a taint to the overall career where we wouldn't have to think just, the talent, what could have been if only he had aged better than that. And we could just appreciate the great body of work and the thrill that he gave us for the first 10 years or so of his career. And hopefully that's what will be memorable in the long term.
I'm optimistic about that. I thought about this a good bit when we were going through Griffey's Hall of Fame conversation, right? And obviously, his career is very much bifurcated between the part that we all loved and were enthusiastic about, and then, his time basically with the Reds on. And I know that we're aware of that. Like, clearly, I just brought it up. It is part of his story as a ball player. But when the time came for him to, be feted in Cooperstown, nobody cared about that part of it, right? We were just, and obviously Griffey had a cultural import and impact that Trout has never had, right? Like you can't put his fascination with the weather up against Griffey just being like the coolest guy in America for a while, and so there's a difference in their stories related to that, obviously. But I have a feeling that when the time comes for us to mark Trout's career, we're not going to be worried about that piece of it. I think if anything, if there's any regret that we end up having related to his career, like, sure, yeah, I wish that he had just stayed himself for the remainder of his 30s. But I think the thing that people are going to feel the most sort of remorse over is the fact that he just was stuck in Anaheim and only had limited postseason exposure as a result of that. I have a feeling that'll be a much bigger part of the what could have been narrative as it pertains to Trout. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it too, is that we're not even really talking about the larger Angels, quote unquote, wasting Mike Trout or Mike Trout never being on a good team anymore, though that is still true, even though the Angels have been a bit more respectable than expected because Ohtani's not there anymore, because no one was expecting the Angels to go anywhere this year. It's not really front and center. It's not top of mind thinking, oh, yeah, another season that the Angels have squandered with Mike Trout. It's just they have both kind of faded in parallel at this point.
I want to be careful that I'm not like blaming Mike Trout, but like Mike Trout also made proactive decisions to stay in Anaheim, right? He wanted to stay there. And I have a feeling that if at a different juncture in his career, if he had really made a point of it, he could have gotten out of there, if he had wanted to, either by not signing one of the extensions or by saying, hey, trade me. He didn't do that. He wanted to stay there for reasons, some of which I find admirable and some of which I find kind of confounding. But it's hard to say that they didn't waste Mike Trout. But also, Mike Trout decided to stick around. And I bet Angels fans, this most recent couple of seasons notwithstanding, are grateful to him for that. I was grateful to Felix for him deciding to stay. Like it profoundly altered my enjoyment of those Mariners teams. It did facilitate them being more frustrating because I was like, you're ruining this. Let him be. Why? No October. I sounded exactly like that, like a lesser Muppet maybe. But, Trout made his bet. He decided to stay in it.
Yeah. So multiple times he decided.
Right.
And he reaffirmed that fairly recently when the topic of Mike Trout being traded came up, and he pretty consistently said he didn't want to be traded. He wanted to stay. He wanted to win in Anaheim. At this point, that ship has sailed. Unless they want to just eat the contract, he's got 5 years and about $185 million left on his deal after this year. Wow. Yeah, and
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot for the type of player that he appears to be now. And you're not even going to get like Mike Trout trade speculation at this point because
there was none at the deadline. There was no crickets found to chirp that particular song.
Yeah, because at least up until a couple years ago, or, you could talk yourself into, well, every time he's been on the field, he's still great. And now you just can't, because the extended exposure to him kind of counterintuitively has shown that maybe that upside, that ceiling has lowered. So it's a bit of a bummer. I do think we need a different way to refer to that phenomenon of a team not contending, not being good while it has a great player, other than wasting that player, because I do, and I know we're in agreement on this, that there is a great value in having a great player, regardless of whether your team is any good. And in some ways, if your team is bad, it's even more important to have a guy like that who is maybe a career angel at this point and wanted to stay, and that means a lot to the fans. And even if he's in his elder statesman phase, still hopefully conjures some warm, fuzzy feelings and still flashes some semblance of the old talent and reminds you of what was. So there's a real value to that. And especially if it's a phenom like Ohtani or like young Trout, but even more Ohtani, if you're an Angels fan and you can talk about having seen Shohei Ohtani perform at his peak for your team, of course, it'd be better if you could talk about how he took you to the playoffs, but still not too shabby. Not too many people have that sort of joy. So I don't know, maybe we could put it in terms of like failing to capitalize on that situation or something, as opposed to wasting it.
Yeah, I think we might need some new terminology there.
They didn't maximize Mike Trout.
Right. I mean, I still think that we have to grapple with the possibility that this is all our fault, because the number of ailments we heaped on that guy,
it's true.
Hypothetical to be sure, but the number of them that we heaped on, I don't know how magic works. Do you? You know, are we responsible? The wildest thing about Mike Trout is that, and I don't mean to say this is true over the current contract he's sitting on, but like over the course of his career with the Angels, he's still going to be on the right side of like a surplus value calculation. And like not by just a little bit, right? He's not going to squeak by. This is the funny thing when you get at that part of the, and I'm making like kind of conservative assumptions, I guess, about dollars per WAR, but still, like, this is the wild thing that happens when you get to that level of production. It's like you can't be paid. I mean, you could be paid. I don't mean it like it's impossible, but in the current like salary and payroll environment, you're never going to be paid commensurate with your value, because you'd be making like $60 million a year. Right. So it's a funny sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So he has made to this point almost $320 million.
Right.
He's got a little more than 185 left. So he will have earned just a little more than $500 million through his baseball salaries alone. And right now, if you go to his FanGraphs player page and just look at the dollars value there, it's $670 million. Right. And that is just the WAR, 86.9 times the dollars per WAR. Yeah. That's what that value would have gone for on the free agent market. Yep. Of course, he wasn't a free agent every single one of those years.
Totally.
So it's, I guess, slightly misleading. But that's not really misleading, because that's also reflecting the fact that free agency players don't get paid what they're worth. So, yeah.
He was making $650,000 in a 10 WAR season or whatever it was. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. So there's a big surplus value there, even if he contributes nothing from this point forwards. So anyway, I hate to be all negative and doom and gloom about Mike Trout. Again, I'm glad he's out there every day. And if I do tune into an Angels game, which I do a lot less than I used to, then it's just nice to see him and his name in the lineup and everything. And happy birthday, Mike Trout, even though the premise for this bit of banter was that Mike Trout is
less good.
Now. Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's a far nicer topic than I was going to bring to bear, because we were struggling a little bit pre-show to be like, there hasn't really been any news. What are we going to talk about? We have some major leaguers to meet later. Yes. But the only thing I had landed on was, is Dustin May, does his trade to Boston mean that he has the worst hair to uniform clash in baseball? Discuss. That feels a little mean and pointed. I think look, here's the thing. There's precedent for this. Everybody go look at what Andy Dalton looked like when he was a Bengal. That was bad. It's not that Dustin May has this like very bright, distinctive head of hair. And I'm not knocking the hair. I'm saying that hair with the Red Sox uniform, like their base, home whites that's rough. It's not his fault.
Yeah.
And it's not as bad as when Dalton was a Bengal, because when Dalton was a Bengal, it was like, good Lord, this is like something out of an old-timey children's book. This is bad.
Yeah.
This is bad news.
The only thing he could do, though, is, I guess, shave the beard so that there would just be less of the hair and cut the long flowing mane.
Yeah.
So he could have it be such that you wouldn't see the hair at all, because it would just be contained by his cap and he'd have no facial hair. And then I guess that would be one way to resolve that problem if you see it as one. Because it sounds like it could go well in theory, because you have the red socks and the red uniform and red hair, but red hair isn't really red.
It's not really red.
It's orange.
It's orange.
Really. It's more orangey. And there's a little clash there. Again,
not as bad as Andy Dalton, who had a brighter red hair and an orange, and so it was like they didn't match. I don't think that Dustin May should shave the beard. I think the beard suits him. It looks very nice. It's not the worst, but it's maybe the worst of the guys who got traded to a new team. With the blue, the Dodger blue, really provided a ready contrast, and then you were like, oh, okay, a ready contrast.
ready.
See, doesn't this feel worse as a topic than it feels like I'm picking on Dustin May. Dustin May had a terrible debut.
Yeah.
It was not good. It wasn't good.
He didn't choose which team traded for him. He didn't choose the color of the uniforms.
Red Sox
didn't choose the color of his hair. Yeah, but he chose the quantity of his hair. But I don't know. I think maybe the Dalton Bengals look might be better, just because I actually think there's closer.
Not.
I think there's the color palette, hue there. It's a closer match, I think.
That's the problem. It's closer, but it's not quite the same. This is the problem. It's it's almost perfect, but not quite. And so it was no. He looks like the part of it too is that Andy Dalton is much closer to the Heat miser in his look, and so.
It looks to me, though, that he just he really liked being a Bengal, and he took it so seriously that he just wanted to be Bengal colors just head to toe. And maybe he even dyed it to embrace the Bengals color scheme, which I know is not the case. But that just looks to me like he just bleeds Bengal orange.
Well, he's not a Bengal anymore. He's a Panther currently. I don't think that he dyed it. I think everyone's I came to this baseball podcast to hear about Andy Dalton, current quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, backup quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. No, when he was at TCU, the orange and the purple. I don't know if I like that or not. I forgot he went to TCU.
I'm not suggesting that he chose his hair color based on the team, just that it looks like that. He took it so seriously that he wanted to just rep the team colors wherever he went.
Right, but then he dialed it up a little too strong, and you're like, whoa, Andy, too much. Anyway, Dustin May, I hope you have a better time pitching for the Red Sox than your debut, because, boy, was that not the best.
Well, maybe we can pivot for a second from a former phenom to a present phenom. I just wanted to remark for a moment on the similarity of the stats in Paul Skeens' first 2 seasons.
Okay.
He has almost identical stats through this point in the season compared to his final stats from his rookie year. The ERA is 1.94 compared to 1.96. The expected ERA, according to StatCast, is 0.04 apart. The FIP is 0.12 apart.
Yep.
He has now thrown more innings than he did last year because he's made one more start, but on a innings per start basis, it's essentially the same. He's thrown 24 starts, 144 innings compared to 23 starts last year, 133 innings. He has essentially had the same season. I guess if you wanted to nitpick, you could say that there's some aspects of this season that are not quite as good. He's not missed as many bats. The strikeout rate is a little lower. The average and I guess top line fastball speed is down a tad, which I think is probably because we asked him about that on Effectively Wild when we talked to him this spring. And we just put that in his head and the Jacob deGrom comp. And hey, maybe you don't have to be max effort all the time. So he's lost or maybe intentionally taken off about half a tick from the average four-seamer this year. But the control is like walk rate is basically identical. He's been a little more fortunate home run per fly ball rate, and thus home run rate wise. And so the strikeout rate is down a tad and the ground ball rate is down a tad. And so perhaps there's a little bit of better fortune buoying the line. But on the whole, he has just repeated a superlative start to his career. And it's really nice that a phenom like that, with all the hype that surrounded him, he has completely lived up to it. I don't know whether he's exceeded it, but he has not fallen short of it one iota. He has been, from the day he arrived, maybe the best pitcher in baseball. If you do the FanGraphs WAR back to last May 11th, which was his first start, he is second in standard FanGraphs WAR to Tarek Skubal alone. So he's tops in the National League. And if you do RA9 based WAR, runs allowed based WAR at FanGraphs, he's number one. He clears Skubal by more than a win, best in baseball. So basically fully formed best pitcher in baseball from day one. And unlike, say, Steven Strasburg has not sproinged and flamed out quickly after that exciting debut, he has just kept chugging along. And he's just been great. And I feel like this is kind of just who he is. He's just going to put up these numbers as long as he has this sort of stuff.
Yeah. And, we've seen him exhibit adaptability, not only as it pertains to the velo, but also as it pertains to his repertoire. And so I can imagine the contours and sort of shape of his production looking a little different year to year, depending on what he thinks he needs to adjust or alter. But it generally being of this caliber, that's pretty exciting. And I would hope would ignite some urgency on the part of the team to really surround him with the kinds of not only complementary players, but other core players who can really take advantage of that while he's around to offer it. Because if he keeps pitching like this and Pittsburgh's approach continues to be what it is, the minute he can get out of there, you have to imagine he will. So, I hope that Pittsburgh fans get to enjoy a couple of good runs with him, because I wouldn't want to face that guy in the postseason. Are you kidding? Absolutely not.
There were some rumors, reports that the Pirates were not open to, but discussing an extension with Paul Skeens a few days ago. But then that was kind of downplayed by other reporters. And I mean, they might express interest,
sure,
but why would that interest be mutual at this point? If it's anything close to the typical Pirates pay scale, and what could they possibly do to assure him that they're actually going to invest in the roster and surround him with complementary players? So those conversations wouldn't go very far were I in Paul Skeens' shoes, unless I just really loved Pittsburgh. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. It's a nice town. But yeah, I don't see that happening. But I'm happy to watch him pitch, even though it is a little depressing to see him lose as often as he has, or to see the Pirates lose when Paul Skeens is pitching, and for him to get as little run support as he has at times. I still do find myself tuning in to watch Paul Skeens quite often, because regardless of how many runs the anemic Pirates offense scores while he's on the mound, or what bullpen support he gets, I'm there to watch Paul Skeens put on a pitching clinic, and he has. So yeah, his win-loss record is 7-8, and I guess it's another nail in the coffin of wins and losses for pitchers as something people pay attention to. I'm pretty sure that's been 6 feet under for a while at this point, but I'm still deriving some joy. Now, I'm not a Pirates fan, and I'm sure for Pirates fans, it's probably possible to appreciate his pitching prowess. That was a lot of P words. But then also, I'm sure it's just infuriating.
Sure, yeah.
Because every time he does that, you're kind of counting down to when you lose control of him. And it's that same conversation about wasting or squandering or failing to capitalize on. They're not maximizing Paul Skeens, that's for sure. But he is maximizing himself, if not max efforting himself. His top speed for the fastball this year is down 1.5 miles per hour from last year. And I say, well done, sir. I say, congratulations. I say, you're doing the right thing, because if you can run a sub-2 ERA as it is, or even if you end up with a low 2s FIP or something, or if the ERA comes up over 2, the horror, then please make that more sustainable.
Can I offer you a little trick for enjoying Paul Skeens starts and not worrying about the fact that he doesn't win them very often? Mm-hmm. When he comes out of the game, you just turn it off. Then you just never see him lose. That's true. You just don't see it. You're like, well, I guess.
Yeah, you often know that he can't get the win when he loses.
Right. But you're just like, what happened to him? Who could say? Who could possibly offer an opinion about that? Now, me, I've seen what I've come here to see. Now I'm moving on. I'm moving on to something else. That's what I would do if I were you. That's what I do when I watch Paul Skeens starts. I'm like, great, he's come out of the game. Surely there's another game on somewhere that I could watch.
Yeah. I see some similarities between Skeens and Trout from a personality perspective. I do find Skeens to be a bit more interesting. Like, even if he's not flashy, he's not necessarily courting attention, though he finds it sometimes, courtesy of his girlfriend as often as himself. But it just seems like, he has deeper thoughts and interests and yearnings and musings. He's not always conveying them, I guess, in the most scintillating fashion. But we quite enjoyed talking to him. He's not defaulting to cliches, so he's not self-aggrandizing. He's not trying to draw attention to himself, but I get the sense that he is sincerely pondering questions and answering them as he actually feels about them. And I enjoy him. And he has this sort of almost precocious dad energy to him, which is it's kind of entertaining in a way in one so young.
Yeah, I think that's right. I appreciate anyone, whether it's part of a formal interview or not, that just is comfortable taking the pause to like contemplate what you've asked them and think about it before they deliver an answer. I think that's a nice attribute to have. I'm glad that we could have a positive influence on Paul Skeens. Maybe that makes up for the fact that we were low grade cursing Mike Trout for like the better part of a decade.
Maybe.
I don't know if that actually balances like cosmically, but I hope it does. We didn't mean to curse Mike Trout, and I can't say that every single one of them was a curse, but I worry that a couple of them kind of popped through the armor there, and then it's like if you hadn't talked about him only being able to eat meat or like slowing down because he has all these coins in his pocket, like maybe he'd be
that's the thing that reassures me, is that he has not actually been visited by 7 biblical plagues or whatever. It's not like,
it hasn't been any of the things that we raised.
Right. Yeah. It's not the exact scenarios that we, or to be honest, mostly our listeners over the years devised. Yeah. So,
it's not us at all.
It's not like there has actually been a permanent physical rain cloud that is suspended over Mike Trout at all times. Metaphorically, maybe it seemed like that at times, but not actually. Yeah, his body has betrayed him, but not in the ways that we entertained on the podcast.
Okay, so it's not. At most, it's our listeners' fault, not ours individually, specifically.
Let's shift the blame. I think that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But they do have a similarity just in how delightfully mundane their interests are also. Like Trout with weather, Skeens with groundskeeping, it's just like it's simple pleasures, and that's nice for guys who are so great at what they do at such early ages.
I would need a mundane distraction if I could do what either of those guys could do. I would need to feel grounded in something that isn't highfalutin, and we don't know them. So they may have other interests they've developed that we're unaware of that would be best described as highfalutin, I suppose. But it's like taking care of your grass. That's nice. It's nice to take care of your yard. Gardening is a simple pleasure that many enjoy. That's really all groundskeeping is like more straightforward gardening.
And they are highly intertwined, weather and groundskeeping. So they could have a meeting of the minds. Yeah. Their mutual interests have a strong bearing on each other, really. So you got to take weather into account when you're keeping the grounds.
Maybe Paul Skeens can come fix my lawn so the HOA stops bothering me. Maybe that could happen. It's just that it's so hot, Ben. It's so hot. And that part of the yard, it's in shade. What do you want from me? Really? What do you want from me? They're just going to seed it for winter grass soon anyway. What do you...
I'm in your corner there.
Thank you.
All right. So speaking of extensions for a player like Skeens, I was just reading something. Neil Payne at his Substack, the aptly named Neil's Substack, he did a little check-in on the state of extensions and specifically pre-arb extensions pegged to Roman Anthony's new extension with the Red Sox. And one thing he noted here was how rare a pre-arb extension for a pitcher is, at least like a big high dollar one. It's almost unheard of. And I guess that's not shocking, but maybe the magnitude of the skew toward position players sort of surprised me. So Neil writes here, he did some adjustments relative to average payroll in the first year of these deals to kind of put them on the same scale. And so he found, for instance, that Anthony's is the 6th longest of any pre-arb extension since 2011, and it's the 9th largest relative to the league in that span. He found that each of the top 13 biggest contracts relative to an average payroll in year one of the deal since 2011 belonged to batters. So all of the top 13 were for position players, as did 25 of the top 26.
Wow.
The lone exception was Spencer Strider, who signed a 6-year, $75 million extension for 2023. So no one else, no other pre-arb pitcher has had that kind of high dollar deal or long-term pre-arb extension. So that just makes the Skeens scenario even more far-fetched, although if you were going to give pre-arb money and a lot of it to any pitcher, it would
probably be him.
Paul Skeens. But that just does go to show. I mean, that's teams putting their money where their mouth is and saying, well, we just can't really trust pitchers long term. Yeah. And even Spencer Strider, he has elbow surgery and comes back and doesn't look quite like his old self, at least initially. So that's really striking to me, that if you're a pre-arb pitcher, you're just not going to get that kind of deal. Maybe that would have gone without saying, I don't know. But the fact that there are just like no exceptions to that rule, really, that stood out to me. And Neil ran the numbers to see, okay, like how have these worked out for teams overall? And he writes, whether a prospect is a hitter or a pitcher, we can see why teams have trended toward buying up more years of players under team control, even if it means operating on less of a sample to evaluate the player's true talent and foregoing those ultra-cheap and productive young seasons that are baked into MLB's salary system. If we look at the completed non-veteran contract extensions in SpotTrack's database since 2011, tracking each player's average value created per FanGraphs WAR-based dollar valuations versus his average annual value paid over those seasons, we see that the typical pre-arb extension across all positions offers more than double the surplus value per season as deals signed once a player hit arbitration. So you get twice the bang for your buck, or even more, if you can sign a player to a pre-arb extension than if you sign them to an arb extension. So that's why it has paid overall for teams to do this. And as Neil notes, that could be because only the best players tend to get those very early deals. Right. Because if you're Roman Anthony, there's a lot of confidence that you're going to be good because you're young, you're good already in the majors, you were the number 1 or number 2 prospect heading into this season, so you don't need as huge a sample of MLB production to say, yeah, we trust this guy to continue to produce. And so, yeah, the earlier you're signing someone in their career, maybe the more of a no-doubter they are, or a less doubter they are. Of course, there are some guys who were doubters in retrospect. Sure. There's Scott Kingery, there's Evan White, as you well recall. And, you know, injuries played a part in both of those guys' careers, I guess, and also just not quite panning out. But
too weird an ass to overcome for Evan White.
So, but that's why it pays. And this is just going back to 2011 too. So this isn't even looking at earlier ones like the first Evan Longoria extension, where teams were probably making bank even more before players and their agents got a little more hip to this, maybe being a bad deal for them on the whole. The other interesting thing that he notes here is that this does seem to be paying off for teams less and less over time. So he breaks the pre-arb signings into yearly classes based on when the deal kicked in, tracks the average surplus value per season for players who've completed at least 80% of their deals as of this season. It seems to be that these players are providing less and less of an edge over time. In fact, by the time of the class of 2020, our pre-arb group was down to an average of just $2.3 million in surplus per year, and negative $0.1 million among the batters specifically. So that could just be because that particular class had some not incredible players. Brian Hayes is in there. Miles Straw is in there, for example. But it seems like there's just diminishing returns, maybe, that, you know, I guess the earlier you signed some stars, then they aren't available to be signed in subsequent years. And so the earlier classes just look better by comparison. But he concludes it's also true that just like any other novel strategy, the more it catches on and everyone starts doing it, the less of a bargain it becomes.
Because they're making more. So the surplus value is diminished because they're maybe making a little more on average with the deals than they used to, right?
Yeah, because, players, agents have looked at some of the steals that teams have gotten, and players maybe, it's hard to say being hoodwinked. Obviously, in all of these deals, you're making many millions of dollars. You're setting yourself up for life. You're taking away any concern that you might have about just being left with nothing as long as you invest it wisely. But as Neil writes, the practice went from practically unheard of in the mid-2000s to having teams commit roughly 200% of a league average payroll to pre-arb extensions in aggregate per season in the early 2010s. So you start doing that more and more, and players start to know their worth, I guess. And that doesn't mean that you don't go and get a Roman Anthony because he's really good and you want to keep him around for a long time. But yeah, it does seem to be a little bit less of a one weird trick life hack kind of thing. Like this will automatically pay off, just incredible investment for teams. And now maybe the players are driving a harder bargain, or they're waiting for free agency in some cases, or they're just fewer candidates because they've all been snapped up already. I don't know. But yeah, there are fewer of them, I guess, or if not fewer of them, then just fewer that are total slam dunks, home runs, touchdowns, whatever sports metaphor we want to use here. So maybe Roman Anthony will work out so well that the Red Sox will gain a great deal of surplus value here. They certainly hope so. Red Sox fans probably hope so too, now that he's signed and they want him to be the best that he can be. But it was interesting. I think it shows why teams have been motivated to do this, why it has paid off on the whole, but why it's not paying off quite as well anymore if you just go by surplus value, as opposed to just saying, well, it's a win just to keep that player in your uniform for a while and have that be a certainty.
Yeah, it definitely depends on like how you're defining it. And to say, oh, they're less of a bargain doesn't mean that like none of those players worked out or were good and productive major leaguers, even very good major leaguers. Was Brian Bayo not a pre-arb extension?
He was, but I think he wasn't one of the top ones by dollar value. Yeah, because that's another thing. Like got to give the Red Sox some credit.
They're doing a lot of these.
They are doing a lot of these. Yeah. So, I mean, they signed Christian Campbell to one, and then he has a hot start, and then he cools off, and that went south quickly this season.
Yeah, great. I think you would grade the Christian Campbell pre-arb extension as incomplete at this moment. Absolutely. Like, it's just too early,
Right. But then, I mean, the Crochet extension, they signed Crochet, they signed Anthony now, they signed Bale. Like, that's, I mean, I hate to invoke another AL East team here, but Orioles fans are quick to observe that they've not signed anyone to an extension. So it's one thing to not break the bank in free agency. That can be frustrating. But if you are at least putting these other players in place and keeping them in place for a long time, and that's especially important for the Red Sox, given their recent history of trading each face of the franchise in succession, you got to make some sort of goodwill gesture to your fan base to say there is going to be some continuity. It's not going to be constant turnover. You can emotionally invest in this young group of guys because we are financially investing in them.
Well, and I would imagine that if you're a Red Sox fan, and let's see if I thread the needle on this quite right, because, some of those contracts are signed by different people. Like, you might have different folks negotiating them. But part of what, I think the takeaway, one of the concerns to come out of the whole Devers fiasco was that this front office just wasn't able to have relationships with players that were productive, right? And so if you're seeing Roman Anthony, and granted, Roman Anthony is going to make a lot of money, and that can cover up all number of disputes. But like, to see Roman Anthony say, no, I want to stay here. I think this is a good deal. Yeah. Like, it offers him the ability to make much more money depending on the escalators. Like, for him to commit to staying after you've just had this worry that the current administration is not able to communicate effectively with players, even long tenured and already extended ones, that has to come as something of a relief to the fans too, right? Like, well, it can't be that bad. He can't be that much of a robot. He got Roman Anthony to sign a deal. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, you put up with some robots if you're making $130 million with the potential for $100 million more. But, like, he could do well in arbitration and then go be a free agent somewhere if he's as good as we think and the Red Sox hope. And he opted not to do that. So that seems like a good sign.
By the way, we neglected to mention one other very important extension for a young member of that team, Cedar Rafaela, also signed to an extension and now is flourishing. So, I'm sure there's still some cynicism, and you can certainly look at the Devers and Bogarts and Betts era and say, okay, well, those guys ended up not sticking around that long, and the great team that they put together around them just kind of didn't last. So in theory, the same could happen. History could repeat itself here. Yeah. These guys could end up getting traded too, but this is what you have to do to reinforce and reassure. Like, if you're going to trade all those other guys, you have to say, okay, we have this foundation in place and many more prospects to come. And really, there are very few teams, if any, whom I would rather have from a just sort of future value standpoint, just based on their young, excellent players on the big league roster and the prospect pipeline still to come, just how that whole roster is formed, some of the extensions. There are very few teams, I think, that you would bet on to have a better next 5 years or whatever, just based on those fundamentals.
And you're able to say both internally and to your fan base as you're thinking through, like, how do you then supplement that core? You have all of this payroll certainty. You know what you're going to owe for these guys who are so important to you. And I think that from a budget and planning perspective, it does put you in a good position, not because like, and now we get to trade them, but it's like, no, we're going to keep them. And we know what the 9 most important guys on our roster are going to be making. And so I imagine that would facilitate some conversations with ownership where it's like, okay, we have this group, and it's not like they're inexpensive relative to making the league minimum, but if they're as good as we think, in 5 years, they're going to be making an under market salary relative to what they could get if they even were just going through the arbitration process. So, give us the wiggle room to sign, this guy who we think is important to pushing us over the line. We know exactly what that's going to cost. I think that's an underrated advantage when you're in roster building mode, to be able to say, like, no, we know exactly what Roman Anthony's going to make. Now, I guess they don't know exactly what Roman Anthony's going to make because his contract has the escalators, but you get what I mean. Like, there's an upper bound to his earnings that is known to you today, and it's known to you about what his salary is going to be 4 years from now. And that wouldn't necessarily have been true 2 weeks ago. So I think that can help to kind of grease the wheels internally as you're planning a couple of years ahead, because you can say, okay, this is the year that we like this class of free agents a lot. We're going to spend big. So let's make sure that we aren't in year 2 of luxury tax penalties. It allows you to potentially be nimble around some of this stuff in a way that I think teams that are really smart about how they construct their rosters often do. Like, we see this with the Dodgers a lot. I'd hate to be the one to compliment the Dodgers again. It wasn't even one of my bold predictions, but I just like to say that I was right about them. So anyway, because I'm being insistent only because what nasty emails we got, Ben. Holy cow. Never ruder emails about anything in my tenure. And I've gotten some doozies than people being mad about me saying that the Dodgers were not a surefire World Series winner. Good God. Anyway, they do this very well, and they're not the only team that does it, but they come immediately to mind where, they are committed to spending and they spend big and they aren't afraid to go over the luxury tax threshold, but they also plan several seasons in advance. And so that, if they have a year where they're unenthused about the free agent class, they might take it as a year to dip below, reset their penalties, not because they're being cheap, but because they want to be able to go bonkers 2 years from now or whatever it is, right? So I think that there's that advantage to it also. Wow, see, we said so many nice things about the Red Sox. Yeah. And meanwhile, that person who sent the Blue Jays email is like, what does my stupid baseball team have to do for you to guys
We've talked about the Blue Jays a few times in recent days, I think. Yeah, we've touched on them at least.
When you're excited, you want more. You want nothing but Blue Jays talk. You want all Blue Jays all the time.
Yes. What you just said about the Dodgers and the CBT makes me remember when we talked last time about that email that had the scenario where if you win the World Series, then you're exempt from the tax.
Yeah.
And we said, it probably wouldn't make that much difference in terms of team spending because no one is really an overwhelming favorite anyway. Right. And effectively Wild Wikikeeper and Patreon supporter Raymond, he pointed out in the Discord group that that's for the best that it's that way because you could end up in this sort of self-perpetuating cycle where a team is the best and is exempt from the payroll tax and then wins the World Series and continues to stay exempt from that tax and then is able to spend more and more and more without having to pay the tax while everyone else does. Yeah. And then they could really make themselves into an unassailable super team and it would just be sort of self-reinforcing. So it is maybe for the best that baseball has the natural guardrail of randomness.
Yes, they'd have to put a limit on it. They'd have to be like, you can't do this more than X number of times in a row.
Okay, we have 2 major leaguers to meet. There's one email that I'd like to address before we get to that. This is from Tommy, Patreon supporter, who has a question and wants some advice from us. This is a topic that we've touched on. I don't know if we've answered an email about it specifically, perhaps, but Tommy says, how has distancing yourself from team fandom affected your enjoyment of the game? Is it more, less, or just the same but different? It seems like you, Ben, have distanced yourself more from the Yankees, but got to experience multiple championships during more formative years.
Can't believe I'm being reminded of this like 2 days in a row. Hey.
You, Meg, still remain very close to your Mariners, but have not experienced the same level of success as a fan. Not. That's a charitable way to put it.
That is a nice way of putting it. Very diplomatic.
As a fan of a team that has no interest in investing in their roster year after year, I'm wondering if it may be time to take a step back and try enjoying MLB as a whole. Is this the right decision for me? How would I even start? Is this too low stakes to bring up to my therapist? And this is Tommy, who signs this message, a Cleveland fan. So I assume that he's a Guardians fan, which I'm sure has been frustrating in some respects, certainly from an ownership and spending perspective. But also, that team is always in contention somehow. They manage to make it work and stay in it. So there are worse situations to be in as a fan, that's for sure.
I really appreciate having the distance I do have. And on any given day, I'd prefer the Mariners to win or not. I'm certainly in the minutia of them as a team in a way that is unique among the 30. But I got to say, it has been just such a joy to broaden my view. And it's not like I only watched the Mariners before, but I think that ball players are just so good now. You know, we're just in this, and the game isn't perfect, and we spend a lot of time contemplating the ways that it could be different, but we really just are seeing such incredible talent at the big league level, and getting to enjoy it and have it as, a balm when the Mariners are being lousy or being dopey or whatever it is tremendous. But it's a delight in and of itself. I've realized something about me and sports generally. And this is not unique to baseball, but I was having this thought last night as I was watching the Seahawks Raiders preseason game, because look, I can only be myself, everyone, it can only ever be me. And I'm sitting there getting excited about fullback usage. Good God. And I think that this is what I believe. And I reserve the right to offer a revision to this take if come October, the Mariners are on a deep postseason run and it looks like they're going to make the World Series or even win one, God forbid. The playoffs suck when it's your team, And I know that I don't have a ton of experience with it with baseball, but I remember the anxiety of when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. You just have GERD for a whole month, you're nervous. Unless it's a blowout and your team's winning. The Seahawks Super Bowl was great fun because it was I won't bore everyone with the details of that game because blowout Super Bowls are only fun for the fans of the winning team. They're not fun for anybody else. I acknowledge that. There was a moment early in that game where one of the Thomases on the Broncos, and I don't remember which, got just absolutely destroyed by a Seahawks defender. And I was like, oh, the Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl. It was the first series. It was Seahawks are going to win this game though. And then they did emphatically. I was like, they can't handle this record setting offense. No, it's going to go badly for them. So, and thank God that proved to be true, because then the next year I got to experience devastation that I just get randomly whacked with every freaking Sunday for the rest of my life. It doesn't matter. But the playoffs are so fun and they super suck if your team's in it, and when you're able to just sit back and enjoy the quality of the play, the drama, it's a lot better of a time, in my opinion. And this might just be my inability to generate regular cortisol levels anymore. This might be a Meg problem. But I think particularly in the postseason, being able to enjoy other teams, other players is really tremendous, because when it's your guys out there or gals, I've spent a couple anxious Storm championship runs too. You feel unwell, Ben. It's an acidy feeling for me. I really would liken it to reflux. You're unwell, and they go on for so long. Good, my God, we just. It's every sport now. You just play so much stupid postseason whatever. How are they alive at the end of it, like they just must be exhausted, their bodies broken, their spirits wavering.
Of course, if your team is the last one standing, it's all worth it in the end. You'll have to take my word for it.
Hey, again, I have experienced championships, just not from the Mariners. Right. I am familiar with winning, sir.
That's a good title for this episode. I'm familiar with winning, but no, it's
familiar. I am acquainted.
I'm glad that I had the experience of traditional dyed-in-the-wool hardcore fandom where my mood rose and fall with the success of the team every day. It's definitely more even-keeled without my mood being tied in a significant fashion to the fortunes of a single team, where if that team lost in a certain fashion, it just would leave me dejected or angry. That I don't miss so much, although it's all just sort of flattened because you don't get as high highs really either. Right. So there's a trade-off there. There are aspects of it that I miss. I'm glad that I had that so that I can understand that perspective, having lived it, because that's the way that most sports fans experience sports, and probably baseball most of all among the major ones, because it is a more regional game and people do view baseball through the lens of their local team for the most part. And I do think you lose a lot if you do have that just sort of myopic, very, very narrow focus on a single team. I mean, that is certainly a legitimate way to watch and love sports, and a way that many people do, but you are just costing yourself a lot of delight just by not watching the other teams except when they play your team, or by actively rooting against them. I do think you can have the best of both worlds. I'm not suggesting that these are mutually exclusive. There are people who manage to retain their fandom for a team and still have this more global, holistic view of the sport. And I mean, you're one of them, I guess, to some extent, right? Like it's cost you a little bit of your attachment to the Mariners. And I think it's not inevitable, I guess. There are people who manage to cling to that single team loyalty and feel it as strongly as ever while still being very aware of everything that's going on. And there's kind of a fine line to tread, I guess, especially if you're a media member. You don't want to be biased. You don't want to be a homer. You don't want to miss everything else that's exciting and going on there. But then again, you also want to be able to understand how fans feel and like translate that into content too. So if you can strike that balance, I think it's hard to do, because it's not like I set out to not be a big fan anymore. Right. It happens.
It kind of happened.
Like, I don't know. I got older. I worked for the team. It wasn't like I was massively disillusioned by working for my favorite team or anything. But, it's like it's a business, and you're working for a team, and you're working in baseball. And it's not like you like baseball less necessarily, but it's not your diversion. It's not your recreation. It's your occupation. It's your profession. It's your vocation. So there's just a different relationship to it. And then when I left the Yankees and just became more of a writer, or had started to do that before I was with the Yankees, then I just found it difficult to hyper-focus on one team when there was so much else going on there. So I just gradually lost that focus, because I wanted to watch this other good player over there and that other team. So if you can find a way to do both, then by all means do. If you can still have your primary team that you really root for, but that doesn't preclude you tuning in to watch some other interesting team or some other interesting player, then maybe that's the best way for you to do it. I think most people go, if their fandom shifts over time, and if it's not just, well, I'm no longer a fan, I lost interest in the sport entirely, it's more common, I guess, to go from being a fan of only one team to being a fan of the league than it is to go in the other direction, probably, where you're like appreciating everyone, and then you just decide, no, I'm only watching this team from here on out. So I think there's something to be said for making that transition, or at least dabbling, at least dipping your toe, at least seeing if you can retain your fondness for that one team while still expanding your horizons a little bit.
Well, and I think that one way to maybe to give it a try is, if you have MLB TV, starting with like watching the big inning, which is, it sounds like I'm saying the beginning, the big inning.
Begin with the big inning.
Beginning with the big inning would maybe be a way to go, because you get to literally just sort of bop around in a curated way where you're seeing, interesting play depending on what's going on. So like that's one approach. I think that sometimes I've known people who have found it easier to say, like, let's say you're a Guardians fan, pick an NL team in the same time zone. So you're not having to brush up against a feeling of like, well, but you've beaten my Guardians before. And like NL teams will have beaten your Guardians too. It's tricky because I would say like, go be a Cubs fan, but that might not feel awesome for you as a Guardians fan most immediately. But, pick an NL team in your same general time zone so that you're not having to change the rhythm of when you watch necessarily, but you're able to kind of operate at a distance from the club that you're maybe keen to move on from. I think part of why I found it easy to maintain some connection to the Mariners, even as I was watching more of the league for work, was that like they were just, I'm still in the Pacific time zone, and they were just often like the last game on, Yeah. And so it's like, I would close my evening with this, but I had already watched parts of, the East Coast and Midwestern slate. So being able to maintain your same cadence, I think, can be helpful. It doesn't always feel like work. I still enjoy watching baseball very, very much. And it can feel like, it can feel relaxing. But there are times where I'm just like, I need a break from this. Like after the deadline, I was like, I need a little step back here, just because I'm like, I can't refill the void with this yet. I need to fill the space in my stress load with something that isn't so proximate to work, so that I can think about something that isn't work for the first time in 2 months. So I don't know, just like bop around a little bit. There's no right answer, right? And there's also no wrong answer. If you decide, hey, actually, I grew up a Guardians fan. I've been so committed to this, but like I'm watching the Tigers. This is a fun team and I like them a lot. Like that's fine. That's within your rights as an American.
It allows you to manage your risk, to diversify your portfolio in a way, because if your team is bad, now a part of fandom is that you stick with your team through thick and thin, and then that makes it all the more worthwhile maybe when they get good again, unless they're actively repelling you or leaving your city or something like that. But just a normal bad baseball team, that comes with the territory for most fan bases. But if there is a downturn, that doesn't mean you desert your team necessarily, but maybe you check out some other teams, you play the field a little bit. I mean, I feel like if Tommy is even asking this question, then there's an inclination in him to try this out, because if he's getting other team curious here, there was a time in my life where I couldn't have conceived of not being a Yankees fan and not just watching the sport through that prism. So if you're even getting to the point where you're thinking, maybe this would work for me, maybe I'm missing out here, well, that's perhaps an indication that you could go further in that direction.
Yeah, and just see how it goes, and then if it doesn't grab you, the Guardians will still be there, and here's the thing, they won't know. We're not going to tell Stephen Kwan. You're fine. You just go try it out a little bit and see if anybody else grabs you. And then if not, you can just go back and say hello to Jose Ramirez and act like nothing happened.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you love Stephen Kwan or Jose Ramirez any less. You're just making a little more room in your heart for someone else.
More love. Yeah, yes, you're making room in your heart for more love. And wouldn't we all benefit from doing that, really?
Yeah,
we would.
All right. Well, let's make a little room for love for 2 new major leaguers in our recurring feature, Meet a Major Leaguer, which has not recurred in a bit. It's been a while. I anticipated it for once.
No, you're forcing it. You know, I know you really want to do it.
Yeah, I'm in my head about it now.
You're in your head about it, and you gotta, it needs to be call and response. And I had the thought the other day, I was like, maybe I'll tee Ben up for, it's been a while, but then I gotta be caught unawares. So you just relax. It's going to happen for you.
About it now. Yeah. Well, one will slip out without my realizing it sometime.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll hit me with one and it'll work out fine. Okay. But we are meeting 2 new major leaguers.
Meet a major leaguer. I am very eager to meet this nascent major leaguer. It's the thrilling debut of somebody new. Let's meet this mysterious major leaguer.
There have been 183 new big leaguers this season through Thursday's games. And we have 2 here who have been suggested by listeners. We do take your nominations. We don't always take them. We welcome them. We don't always do them. But in this case, we have. So we have a recommendation from listener Joel, whom you'll be recommending, and a recommendation from listener Patreon supporter Peter, whom I will be introducing you all to. So I will lead off here. And my Meet a Major Leaguer, I always feel like this is show and tell. I'm standing up in front of the class and just like holding up this human person and telling people about him. But my guy is one Josh Simpson. Josh Simpson, who is a Miami Marlin. He is 27 years old. He will turn 28 later this month. Happy early birthday. He is a 6'2", 190 left-handed reliever from Stafford, Connecticut. And he is a long shot major leaguer, as many of our Meet a Major Leaguers are. We tend to go for the non-household name, non-top prospect types whom you might not meet otherwise. And he is a 32nd round draftee. And there are only 2 other guys who've debuted this year who were drafted at least that late. There is Javian Sandridge of the Yankees, who was also a 32nd rounder, and Drew Avens of the A's and Brewers, who was a 33rd rounder. So Josh Simpson, 951st overall pick. He got himself a $25,000 signing bonus. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, I'm going to miss when we run out of the late round guys, when those like 30-something rounders just don't make the majors anymore because the draft doesn't go that deep anymore. It's going to be sort of sad. It's special when you have a 32nd rounder as someone who 950 players were picked ahead of Josh Simpson, and yet he still made it ahead of most of them. So this was in 2019 that he was selected by the Marlins. So he is a career Marlin. He's just been working his way up through the system ever since. Of course, he missed out on the 2020 season that was canceled, but he has just been working his way up. He finally made his big league debut this June 21st, and he got clobbered. He pitched 2 innings against Atlanta. He gave up 4 runs on 3 hits, 2 of them by a fellow rookie on rookie crime, although a major leaguer you probably have heard of, Drake Baldwin. 2 of those 3 hits were by him. He singled against Simpson to lead off Simpson's first inning of work, and then struck the big blow in the next inning, a 3-run home run. So Josh Simpson, probably not the biggest fan of Drake Baldwin that day. So after that game, Simpson's ERA was 18. He subsequently got it down to 3.09, but now it has reinflated to 5.87 because he had 2 multi-run outings recently. Reliever ERAs, it's tough. I mean, I know that we don't put as much stock in ERA anymore, but like he's gone from having an 18 to a 3.09 and then back over 6 again. All it takes when you haven't had a huge sample season is just one bad outing to just completely change the conclusion that most fans would draw if they just eyeballed your stat line, probably. It'd go from, it's like the old game Sam and I used to play, is this guy good with relievers, where it's hard to know sometimes. But certainly in a case like this, where you have 15 2/3 big league innings under his belt, the good news is that of the 502 pitchers who have thrown at least 15 innings this year, the gap between Simpson's ERA and his StatCast-based expected ERA is the 12th largest. So that's good, I guess. The underlying stuff augurs better results ahead. The 5th largest gap on that list, by the way, belongs to my best friend John Brebbia, who I might add, in addition to that better expected ERA work in the majors when he was with the Tigers, he also has a 1.5 ERA in 10 games and 12 innings for AAA Gwinnett, with a 10-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio and a 554 OPS allowed. So please call him up already, Atlanta. Anyway, Simpson sits 94, which is fine for a lefty, and has a 5-pitch mix, 4-seamer, sinker, slider, change, curve. Quite a diverse repertoire for a reliever. Throws each of those pitches at least 10% or so of the time. Thus far, he has missed bats, he's gotten grounders, but he has walked too many guys. The interesting thing about him, well, there are a couple interesting things aside from the fact that he was such a late-round draftee. One is that he is a former phantom major leaguer. So he appeared to have made it back in 2023 in September. He was called up by the Marlins, and he spent several days on the roster, and he never got into a game. And then they sent him back down again. The Marlins made the playoffs that year. He was not on the playoff roster. Technically, he was recalled, or he was activated on the day after the Marlins got eliminated. So I guess you could say he's been called up twice, sort of, just like he was on the roster at least. And he was expected to start 2024 with the big club, most likely. But then misfortune befell him, and he had to have elbow surgery. He had left elbow neuritis, and so he had to have surgery for ulnar nerve neuritis, perhaps not so different from the kind that has plagued us at times with our slight numbness in our pinky fingers. Yeah, so maybe it was more serious for him, or more serious for a pitcher in general. So he was on the IL for most of 2024 and then was activated only late in the year and got into some minor league action. And he's had other injury woes. He had shoulder impingement, I think, the previous season that cost him a couple months. So to be that close to be in the big leagues in 2023 and then be a presumed big leaguer going into 2024 and have that just be a lost season must have been quite frustrating, because you never know. I mean, there are a lot of guys who were phantom big leaguers who never got back and never actually got into a game. And I'm sure there were some long, dark nights of the soul when Josh Simpson was wondering whether he would be one of them. You start having elbow issues, that's the worst case scenario. I was also reading some old articles about his initial call-up story, which is interesting. Like, I wonder, which call-up story do you tell? Like, if someone asks you, if you were a former phantom major leaguer and someone asks you about, oh, how did you get the call? How did you find out you were coming to the big leagues? Do you tell them both stories? Do you tell them the first one, the second one? Do you tell the first one and then caveat it and then tell the second one? Or maybe to simplify things, you just talk about your first big league game or something, maybe. I don't know. But I was reading about, he found out late that he was getting called up in 2023, and he missed his manager's call, and he had a few voicemails, and he calls back and he finds out, oh, I'm coming, and it's late at night, and he got the call, and then his fiance was with him, but he called his parents and his sister, and it's a lifelong dream. And, they've been with him every step of the way. And then they're frantically making travel arrangements to go to Milwaukee, where the Marlins were playing the Brewers. And everyone's scrambling. It's the middle of the night. How do we get to Milwaukee? And they all get there the next day when Simpson arrives to join his new teammates, and then they're following him around and he doesn't actually get into a game. So, they were still with him at that meaningful moment. They get to see him in a big league uniform and everything. So I'm sure they didn't consider it a wasted trip, but probably a bit of a letdown, I would think. Anyway, hopefully they did the same and made the trip again for his actual debut in 2025. And the last thing that I will say, I saved this for last. I didn't mention where he was drafted out of. He went to Columbia University. So he is an Ivy Leaguer. And whenever you have an Ivy League big leaguer, you will hear about that forever, for as long as they're in the big leagues. Every time they come out of the bullpen, the opposing broadcast at least will inevitably mention that, this guy, he's went to Yale, he went to Columbia, wherever it is. So he is the sole Columbia grad in the big leagues right now. By my count, there are 7 active Ivy Leaguers, or there have been 7 at some point this season. There's Josh Simpson. There was Cole Sulser with the Rays, who went to Dartmouth. Hunter Biggie, also with the Rays, who went to Harvard. Ben Rice of the Yankees went to Dartmouth, as did the professor, Kyle Hendricks of the Angels now. And then Matt Bowman, who pitched a bit for the Orioles this year, went to Princeton. And Brent Suter of the Reds went to Harvard. Brent Suter, underrated reliever. He's very good year in and year out, I think. And seems to be a good guy, entertaining guy as well. Loves the climate. Anyway, we have another Ivy Leaguer to add to the list. So I did just look to see which of the Ivy Leagues has been most productive, or which of the Ivy League schools has been the most productive when it comes to minting major leaguers. I looked in the draft era, and, we're 60 years into the draft era at this point. So that's a pretty big sample, though I know these schools pride themselves on going back to colonial times, I guess, with the exception of Cornell. So they did have big leaguers who predated the draft. But draft era only, 1965 on. Would you care to guess which of the Ivy League schools has been the baseball powerhouse in a relative sense?
Princeton.
Princeton is second, I would say, in terms of total WAR. Yeah, total WAR generated. There, Princeton's second, third in
Yale.
Yale is third in
Harvard.
total WAR. Nope, Harvard's fifth. Yeah, it's Dartmouth. Dartmouth is the baseball bastion of the Ivy League. Dartmouth has sent 10 players to the big leagues, or 10 draftees out of Dartmouth have made the majors and have combined for 52.8 WAR, which might not sound like so much for 10 players, but is by far the most of any of the Ivies. So, 10 players, 52.8 WAR for Dartmouth. Princeton, 7 players, 34 WAR. Yale, only 3 players, but 24.7 WAR. So all of the Yaleys have actually been pretty good at baseball. You have Ron Darling, Craig Breslow, and, Ryan Lavarnway also was in the mix there. It's mostly Darling. But then UPenn, 4 major leaguers, 23 WAR. And then Harvard has had some quantity, 8 players, but only 6.7 WAR. Brown, just 1. Only 1 Brown grad has made the majors and produced 4.6 WAR. That was Bill Allman. And then Columbia, 4 major leaguers, 1.5 WAR in total. Sadly, so far, Josh Simpson has subtracted from that total, but hopefully he will add to it at some point. And then Cornell skunked. Cornell has not sent a single big leaguer to the majors, or at least no one has been drafted out of Cornell and made the majors. So I guess another way in which Cornell is the exception, not from the colonial era, and no big leaguers drafted out of there. So some Ivy inferiority complex, Ivy imposter syndrome there going on for Cornell, perhaps. But that's my story. Marlins reliever, not the first Marlins reliever we have met in this series. Of course, Declan Cronin, who is dear to me because he attended my high school and unfortunately has not been in the big leagues thus far this year, but also still in the Marlins organization in AAA. Wish him well. And now I will root for Josh Simpson as well, who is probably not the best known rookie to debut this year for a Florida team named Simpson, because there was also Chandler Simpson of the Rays. But unlike Chandler Simpson, Josh is still in the big leagues. So there's that.
Okay. Well, my major leaguer is Dugan Darnell.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Chandler Simpson's back in the big leagues. Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't
I thought he had been sent down again. But yeah, he was back as of a couple days ago.
Yeah. Okay. Dugan.
Dugan Darnell. Dugan, who is 28. He's a right-handed reliever for the Colorado Rockies, and he has had quite the winding journey to the majors, which is, I think, why he came on the radar of listener Joel, who suggested him. Darnell is from Northville, Michigan, and in high school, he was a shortstop, not a pitcher. All good players in high school are shortstops. But he was quite undersized. So he was only 5'1" and barely 100 pounds when he started playing high school ball. And he told the Spokesman Review, which is a paper in Spokane, Washington, in 2021, quote, "I was always the smallest guy on every team. I was that little shortstop who was just fast and quick and a contact hitter." And with that profile, you might imagine he wasn't heavily recruited to play college ball, but by the end of high school, he had grown a good bit. He was 5'9" and a good enough hitter to play for Division III Adrian College, which is also in Michigan. A good D3 program, but a D3 program nonetheless, and continued to grow and eventually shift to third base. And then, and here I'm going to quote from that Spokesman Review piece again, "He was fooling around with teammates one day, throwing off the mound, and he was surprisingly topping out in the low 90s. That was the end of my junior year, beginning my senior year," he said. "And that was where it all started. At first, I was just playing third base and chucking it hard over to first. The coach added to Darnell's responsibilities. His senior year, he played third and was the squad's closer. I didn't throw anything but a fastball," he said. "I'd go from playing third base for 8 innings to just going straight to the mound, throw as hard as I could, and get my 3 outs. My body grew more. I got more into the weight room, into arm care, all that. And next thing I know, my senior year is a different story." His first full season pitching, which was that senior year, he recorded a school record 8 saves with an 0.39 ERA. He struck out 37 over 23 innings. And he was a Division III fourth teamer, which doesn't sound particularly illustrious, but I'm sure he was excited. And, he did all of that, but he was not drafted and started to line up other opportunities. He was going to follow his brother into finance. But before a job started for him, he said, "I wanted to pursue baseball, so I just kind of called around." And this is from a post on the Rockies official team blog. All these teams have Medium blogs now. This is by Jack Etkin. So he calls around Darnell, not Etkin. The Rockford Rivets in the Northwoods League, a collegiate summer league that uses wooden bats, said they could use his help. Darnell spent 3 or 4 weeks with that team. He went 0-1 with a 2.65 ERA in 7 games, 1 start with 9 walks and 19 strikeouts. Darnell said it went really well, but it didn't go well enough for him to get any pro authors. "So I thought that was it," he said. "I hung it up and went to work in Chicago. It was the real world. It was quite a perspective check, I guess." And he starts this job, and then one day he gets a call from the Gary South Shore Railcats of the American Association. And Darnell said he quit his job on the spot. He only appeared in 3 games for the Railcats, which might have made him a little nervous about having quit his job. He was there to basically cover innings for a guy who was on the injured list for the Railcats, but it was enough to attract the attention of the East Side Diamond Hoppers of the United Shore Professional Baseball League. And so he played the 2020 season with East Side. He earned 5 saves and allowed just 4 runs in 28 innings, posting a 0.31 ERA. And again, this is from the Spokesman Review. I was having a really good year. At the end of the year, a lot of different teams were calling, just saying, hey, you're on our radar. But with COVID, nobody really knew what opportunities were going to present themselves. So that was just kind of put on hold. And he continued to work out and refine his approach to pitching, trying to build out his repertoire and have more than just the fastball, and then returning to the Rockies post. After his success in 2020, he continued to train. He saw other minor leaguers signing minor league deals, guys getting ready to go to spring training. He was confident in his stuff. He felt he was physically and mentally ready to pitch an organized ball. He had to attract interest from a team, but he had no contacts in any team's front office. It was winter. How to be seen? Darnell took a desperate times call for desperate measures approach. He sent a 2-part video that included his most recent bullpen with Rapsodo numbers and game footage from 2020 that highlighted each of his pitches. He sent the video to 7 or 8 major league teams, typically to about a half dozen people with each team. He looked for emails of front office members on the internet. He found an email. He sent the video. He was flying blind. He had no choice. I sent it to as many people as I could because I knew that deep down in my heart and in my mind, I had the stuff. I didn't want to leave any what ifs, any stones unturned, so I was giving it my all. And one of the people to receive that video was John Wheel, who oversaw professional scouting for the Rockies at the time. Wheel said he used to get several videos a month from players in independent leagues and had mentors who taught him he always had time to respond to every single person. That said, the response was typically thanks, but no thanks. I was in charge of signing pitchers, he said. I watched the video and I'm like, well, this isn't all that bad. This is pretty good. He had some leverage on the ball. He could spin the breaking ball. There was a little something there, and his arm worked well. There were some text exchanges and a phone call between the two of them after he sent the initial video, and that communication helped to sway him. But I'm saying Wheel, but it might be Vey. W-E-I-L. How would we say that?
I guess I would say Weil.
Weil. Oh.
But I don't know.
Regardless, he now scouts for the Nationals, but he said he had never signed a guy off video in his life. He doesn't believe in it, preferring out of respect for the craft to rely on the process where a scout would be sent to see Darnell throw. So he said, so there was some trepidation in signing him off of video. And Wheel, Vey, he called Darnell and told him that the Rockies would not be sending a scout to watch him throw. Darnell was dejected and asked why, and he said it was because they didn't want to scout him, because instead they wanted to sign him. So he signed in the offseason of 2021, and he had a great spring training and ended up being assigned directly to Low A Fresno. He had a 1.95 ERA in 2021, pitching between low and high A. And then he started what became sort of a familiar pattern for Darnell, where upon his initial promotion to a new level, he would struggle very badly. And that proved to be true in 2022, which was much more of a challenge for him. He drew a AA assignment, and it resulted in an ERA and a FIP in the 5s. And then prior to the 2023 season, he went and played winter ball in Australia, which went very well. He pitched to a 2.41 ERA over 15 appearances, striking out 28. The following season went better, at least at AA, but then upon a promotion to AAA, he had an ERA in the 6s. And that brings us to his scouting report at FanGraphs. This is his 2024 scouting report. He was 35 plus, placing 43rd on the Rockies list. And here is Eric's report. After he finished pitching at Division III Adrian College, he pitched in a few independent leagues and worked as a mortgage loan officer, according to his LinkedIn. That's the scouting you get at FanGraphs. Until he signed with the Rockies, he has struck out more than a batter per inning since debuting in affiliated ball and has continued to strike out plenty of upper-level hitters so far in 2024. He touched 97, and the uphill angle on his fastball helps it miss bats. His splitter's movement varies from pitch to pitch, at times looking like a slider, at others like a pure splitter, and sometimes like just sort of floats toward the plate and still garners an uncomfortable swing. After his velo was down somewhat in 2023, it has rebounded early in 2024. He was sitting 94 to 96 early on at Hartford, where he was essentially demoted after struggling at AAA during the second half of the 2023 season. This guy has carved a unique path to the upper levels of the minors and is going to pitch in the big leagues as an up-down reliever. I will note he did not make the 2025 Rockies list, so I think Eric was less impressed by the back half of his 2024 season. But
Josh
this
Simpson,
year,
not ranked on the Marlins list either, to be clear.
Yeah, this year he posted a 3.19 ERA and a 3.71 FIP at AAA, and his contract was selected on August 1st because, as our listeners might remember, the Rockies dealt Jake Bird to the Yankees, so they needed some bullpen help. And now I'm quoting from Purple Rose Evan Lang, who is quoting Darnell saying, "I blacked out. I thought I was going to cry, but I didn't cry. I was sweating quite a bit. I didn't cry until I called my fiance and let out some emotion, just smiling, driving back to my apartment to pack up." I'm like, is this real life? It didn't feel real until I got to the airport. And his first big league action came in a truly bonkers baseball game. He entered with the Rockies down 10-16 in the 8th inning. So these are meant to be low leverage innings, right?
Yeah.
You bring in the new guy. He's going to mop up a little bit. He got Brian Reynolds to ground out, and then Nick Gonzalez singled. They're playing the Pirates, by the way. But O'Neill Cruz grounded into a double play and got him out of it. And then the Rockies scored 2 runs in the bottom of the inning. But it's still, it's still a 4-run game. So Darnell goes back out there for the 9th. And he held the Pirates scoreless. Tommy Pham flew out to right. Joey Bart grounded out to second. Jared Triolo struck out looking. And that's why he was in line for the win when the Rockies rallied to walk it off in the bottom of the inning, which is bonkers. So his first big league game, he earns the win in a very improbable comeback. And after the game, manager Warren Schaefer said, "I saw a guy that has taken such a long road to get here, a winding road, a lot of failure. I know I saw him poised out there tonight. Who knows what was going through his head?" And for his part, Darnell said that he was thinking, focus on executing pitches, not getting freaked out. I was just trying to breathe. It felt like a movie. It's been crazy, but I've enjoyed every second of it, and I wouldn't change a thing. All told, he has thrown 5 innings across 4 games. He has a 3.60 ERA and a 5.11 FIP. And that has been Dugan Darnell and the various people whose names I can't pronounce along the way.
Yeah. I'm always skeptical of the "I wouldn't change a thing," but
I would change so many things if I were him. But
I might make it a little smoother and easier. But I do understand the philosophical the perspective.
Yeah.
Whatever didn't kill him made him stronger, and maybe he had to go through all those things to get here. And it's a good way to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Even if someone actually presented you with the choice and said,
right,
you could just be the best pitcher in baseball from the get-go. Well, that'd be tough to turn down. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have met his fiance or something. Like there's probably all sorts of other stuff that went on in his life that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't taken exactly that course. So always nice to see an indie baller make it, and an undrafted guy. You topped my 32nd round draftee with an undrafted guy. Yeah, the Gary South Shore Railcats, they signed a couple of stompers, much to my and Sam's slight dismay.
Chagrin.
Back in 2015. They got promoted to that level. That was how low the stompers were, that the Railcats, that was a big step up from the Pacific Association. But yeah, happy for Dugan Darnell. Great name. First Dugan in big league history. I mean, there have been multiple surname Dugans, but not a first name Dugan.
Not a first name Dugan.
Yeah, and that's his name. All right. He's Dugan Tate Darnell. So Rockies have the lowest FanGraphs WAR from a bullpen, which is not a shock, I guess, but they could use some help from Dugan. Well, I think we fulfilled the assignment. We chose a couple roughly 28-year-old Rockies and Marlins rookie relievers. So that's how we drew it up with Meet a Major Leaguer. That's this segment is all about. It's a segment for the sickos. And now Josh Simpson and Dugan Darnell. And that'll do it for today and for this week. Thanks, as always, for listening. You can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Michael Zerbib, Lawrence McDaniel, Mark Wagner, Dexter Mull, and Jake Schultz. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, your comments, your intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. We're still adding themes to our rotation as they arrive. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube Music and elsewhere. There's also an Effectively Wild subreddit you can join and post on, or just lurk on and read at r/effectivelywild. Finally, you can check the show notes at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.
How can you not be pedantic? A stat blast will keep you distracted. It's a long slog to death, but they're sure to make you smile. This is Effectively Wild. This is Effectively